everyone, you're watching L24 Nightly News with me, Miriam Zian, to the headlines. "57 Palestinians were killed in Zionist strikes in southern Lebanon, with 105 casualties reported in just 24 hours. Over 60 were killed or injured in the Kola area of Beirut and Sidon. 6 paramedics died in Bekaa airstrikes. Next, Hezbollah declared readiness for ground invasions and plans to choose a new Secretary General. They reaffirmed support for Gaza while the UN noted 100,000 fleeing to Syria. Also coming up next, 20 Palestinians were killed in 2 new Israeli attacks in Gaza, including women and children. Resistance forces targeted Israeli troops in Netzarim, causing casualties and destroying military vehicles. And Algeria emphasized its security is linked to African stability, condemned derogatory commands from another state representative, and reiterated support for Sahrawi self-determination and urged action against foreign interventions in Libya. Stay tuned for that. More right after the break. Hello and welcome again to the details. We begin with this breaking news. The U.S. State Department has confirmed that Israel informed Washington about what it called limited ground operations within Lebanese territory. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have declared the border between the occupied Palestinian territories and Lebanon a closed military zone, coinciding with the Lebanese army repositioning its troops near the border amid threats of a possible Israeli invasion of Lebanon.
We have been in conversations. They have been informing us about a number of operations. I've seen reports about ground operations. We've had some conversations with them about that. They have, at this time, told us that those are limited operations focused on Hezbollah infrastructure near the border, but we're in continuous conversations with them about it.
And effectively, we have just received that the Israeli army has officially announced the beginning of a ground military operation in southern Lebanon. And still with the same file, the Lebanese Health Ministry revealed that 57 martyrs and dozens of wounded have fallen as a result of intense airstrikes carried out by Zionist forces in southern regions of the country just on Monday night alone. The Public Health Emergency Operations Center recorded that the toll includes victims of massacres committed by the occupation in the Hermel area, resulting in 12 martyrs and 20 wounded, in addition to 45 martyrs and 70 wounded from the massacres in Sidon. Also in this file, the Lebanese Health Ministry announced that the death toll from the Zionist strike targeting east of Sidon in southern Lebanon on Sunday has risen to 45 martyrs and wounded to 70. In a related context, 5 children were killed in a Zionist airstrike that targeted eastern Sidon in southern Lebanon on Sunday. According to the Lebanese news agency, on Monday, the Zionist warplanes targeted the area of East Sidon on southern Lebanon, resulting in the martyrdom of 5 children and 5 injuries to the others. And similarly, the Lebanese Ministry of Health announced on Monday that 105 people were martyred and 359 others were injured in Zionist occupation airstrikes over the past 24 hours. The ministry expressed regret over the international community's failure to take responsibility and put an end to the Zionist entity's continuous violations of international laws. And as an aftermath of the airstrikes, the victims of the strike that targeted the city of Sidon were buried in a mass grave this Monday. Images that remind the families of the victims of the daily atrocities endured by Palestinians in Gaza.
We are preparing a mass grave for the martyrs who were killed in the attack, for the families who were martyred in the attack on Ain al-Dalb. So far, I have been informed of the presence of 30 people, 30 martyrs. But we don't know what will come of it because the aggression continues and we don't know how many people are still under the rubble.
We heard the sound of the missiles and we ran. Some of us did not even have time to get dressed, and people were screaming.
Still with news on Lebanon, the Deputy Secretary General of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, confirmed on Monday that the party's operations have continued at the same pace, if not more intense, since the martyrdom of the party's Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah. In a televised speech that lasted about 20 minutes, Qassem expressed Hezbollah's readiness to confront any ground incursion by Zionist occupation forces into Lebanon.
We will face any eventuality and we are ready if the Israelis decide to launch a ground invasion because the resistance forces are prepared to fight on the ground.
Hezbollah Deputy Secretary General Naim Qassem stated further that the party will choose a new Secretary General to succeed Hassan Nasrallah at the earliest opportunity following the established selection process.
We will choose a new Secretary General for the party as soon as possible, in accordance with the selection mechanism approved by the party.
Naim Qassem also pledged that Hezbollah would continue its battle in support of Palestine and the defense of Lebanon, affirming that the party is following through with what he called the alternative plans laid out by Nasrallah before his martyrdom.
The Islamic resistance will continue to confront the Israeli enemy in support of Gaza and Palestine, in defense of Lebanon and its people, and in response to assassinations and the killing of civilians.
And following the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah by the Zionist occupation forces, the signs of an escalation in the Middle East leave the Lebanese uncertain about their fate. Salman Nasib tells you more.
Naim Qassem, who is temporarily in charge of Hezbollah after Hassan Nasrallah assassination by Zionist forces, made his first speech. He indicated that Hezbollah is ready for any ground operations by the Zionist troops and mentioned that the group is continuing its planned operations, calling its previous attacks against the entity minimal. Meanwhile, people in Beirut are anxiously watching the news and feeling frustrated about the situation in their country, concerned about a possible escalation in the Middle East.
The situation in Lebanon is difficult. All areas are now under threat. But we have great faith in God, in this movement, and in the Palestinian cause. Our faith in the Palestinian cause is strong. We could have ignored the Palestinian cause from the start and been safe. But we are all with it until our death. For Hassan Nasrallah, we stand by him.
On the other hand, Lebanese citizens are voiced their frustration over the alarming silence of Arab countries, which do not support the Palestinian cause and consequently their own struggles as well.
What is the next step? You Arab leaders watch as Israel takes control of all Arab countries and seizes us all. This indifference is shameful for the Lebanese and Palestinian people. This indifference is disgraceful.
The security situation in Lebanon is becoming increasingly dire, with all areas under threat. Citizens face challenging living conditions, struggling with access to essentials like food and healthcare, and feeling increasingly isolated. There is growing anxiety about the potential for broader conflicts in the region, further worsening their situation.
Lebanese caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati confirmed that Speaker Nabih Berri pledged to call for the election of a consensus president once the ceasefire is achieved.
أكد لي دولة الرئيس بري أنه فور
We will face any eventuality and we are ready if the Israelis decide to launch a ground invasion because the resistance forces are prepared to fight on the ground. We will choose a new Secretary General for the party as soon as possible, in accordance with the selection mechanism approved by the party. The Islamic resistance will continue to confront the Israeli enemy in support of Gaza and Palestine, in defense of Lebanon and its people, and in response to assassinations and the killing of civilians.
To reactions now, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has rejected any ground invasion of Lebanon, according to his spokesperson. The spokesperson confirmed on Monday that the UN peacekeeping forces in Lebanon, UNIFIL, have been unable to carry out patrols due to the intensity of the Zionist airstrikes.
1701. The Secretary General, on the peacekeeping end, our UNIFIL blue helmets remain in position in the mission's area of responsibility, while the intensity of fighting is preventing their movements and ability to undertake their mandated tasks. We're in the business of calling for de-escalation, calling for events to roll back.
So with reaction, UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi reported on Monday that around 100,000 people have fled from Lebanon to Syria to escape ongoing Zionist airstrikes. Filippo Grandi confirmed that the UNHCR is present at 4 crossing points to receive and guide the displaced.
The number of people who crossed into Syria from Lebanon fleeing Israeli airstrikes has reached 100,000, including Lebanese and Syrians. The flow is ongoing, and the UN High Commissioner for Refugees is present at 4 crossing points alongside local authorities and the Syrian Red Crescent to support those arriving.
And finally, in this file, as violence escalates in Lebanon, over 1 million people flee their homes seeking safety amid relentless bombardment. With humanitarian conditions worsening, can the international community intervene before the crisis deepens? Nabil Khazini has the report.
With no other option, they spend long hours on the road heading to any place where it's safe in Lebanon, with many of them escaping to neighboring Syria. The United Nations estimates there are over 1 million who are fleeing the line of fire, but the wave of these displaced people is stuck between the crossfire. They have to choose between intense bombardment and brutal occupation attacks, or living in such hard conditions to save their lives.
The impact is huge. The bombing was near us. My wife and I were injured. My back was injured. Her back and shoulder were injured. This happened about a week ago.
There were strikes and bombardments, so we left. We were in Rubeiri. We were hit there by Israeli strike. We went to Beirut and there was bombardment also. So we returned to Syria.
Parking lots have become a refuge for many of them who fled to the Lebanese city of Sidon. The occupation assault is pushing the humanitarian crisis into alarming levels. Many displaced people sleep now rough on the streets, crowding public parks and laying on pavements.
We have a lot of demands. The most important one is shelter for these children.
This is what days of shelling has done to parts of Lebanon, and while the international community has warned that occupation attacks in Lebanon could escalate the Gaza war into a wider regional war, the occupation insists in its policy of violence.
And to other topical developments, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf warned against plunging the Middle East into a cycle of crises, conflicts and perpetual wars. In a speech during the general debate of the 79th session of the UN General Assembly in New York, he urged the international community to take a firm stance against Israeli occupation to end what he described as the hell inflicted on the Palestinian and Lebanese peoples.
فالأحرى بالمجموعة الدولية اليوم.
It is imperative for the international community today to act swiftly to put an end to the hell imposed on the Palestinian and Lebanese peoples and to rein in the Israeli occupiers' desire to plunge the entire Middle East into a cycle of endless crises, conflicts and wars.
واللامتناهية.
Still in relation with developments in the Middle East, the Iranian Foreign Ministry stated on Monday that Tehran is prepared to respond to any attacks on its national security and interests, asserting that it will not remain idle. An official statement emphasized that the assassination of Nasrallah and Nilfrouh Shan poses a threat to international and regional security and violates international law. And for his part, U.S. President Joe Biden stated on Sunday that a comprehensive war in the Middle East must be avoided as Zionist bombardments continue in southern Lebanon.
Mr. President, will you deploy more U.S. troops to the Middle East?
Are you going to talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu? Have you had anything to say to him?
Yes, I will be talking to him, and I'll tell you what I say to him when I talk to him.
All-out war in the Middle East be avoided?
It has to be. We really have to avoid it.
And to global public opinion now, approximately 200 protesters gathered in New York in Times Square in New York, despite the rain, to voice their opposition to the continued Zionist strikes in Gaza and Lebanon. Marwa Belawar has the full story.
In the heart of Times Square, voices are rising for justice. Protesters are chanting powerful messages like stay away from Lebanon, free Palestine, and lift the siege on Gaza. Numerous people of various nationalities and religions braving the weather to stand in solidarity against the Zionist strikes on Lebanon and the ongoing genocide in Gaza.
It doesn't matter if the area is Muslim or Christian. It doesn't matter. It's not about Hezbollah. They won't go into Lebanon, and they are bombing every single area. Doesn't matter what. Civilians are getting killed every single day. More than 1 million Lebanese are displaced in those days, and I want justice. And I want a ceasefire, stop the bombs, stop killing civilians, and that's what I want.
While these voices echo in New York, the situation back home is devastating. Zionist strikes are intensifying, shrouding Beirut in smoke and fear. Since October 7th, the bombings have reached alarming levels, leaving many Lebanese feeling trapped.
I'm here today because I believe that the United States government is complicit in the wars on Gaza and Lebanon. Without the funding that we provide to the military, without the armament that we equip the IDF with, without the diplomatic cover that we provide in international fora like the Security Council, these wars would not be possible.
Mainstream media in the US are reporting a widening rift between the Zionist entity and its primary ally, Washington. At this point, nothing seems to stop the Zionists. However, the question raised is who is empowering these actions to continue unchecked in the Middle East. Meanwhile, the situation in Lebanon grows more desperate. Over 1.1 million people have been displaced, forced to leave everything behind in search of safety, escaping the constant threat of death from the sky.
Developments on occupied Palestinian territories right after a short break. In today's Palestine file, Zionist occupation forces committed 2 new massacres in the Gaza Strip, resulting in the martyrdom of 20 Palestinians and injuring 108 others within 24 hours. The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza announced that the death toll from the ongoing Zionist aggression has risen to 41,615 martyrs, in addition to 96,359 injured since October 7. And early Monday, at least 6 Palestinians were martyred and others injured due to Israeli airstrikes on the Nusayrat camp in central Gaza. Medical sources reported that the victims included children and women following an attack on a home belonging to the Mahazir family. Still in the Gaza Strip, 2 Palestinians were martyred and others injured on Sunday due to airstrikes by Zionist warplanes on the Al-Brij camp in central Gaza. Local sources reported that the airstrikes targeted a group of Palestinians in the Al-Brij camp market, resulting in the martyrdom of 2 young men and injuries to others who were transported to Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital. In reaction to the situation in Palestine, the United Nations stressed that the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip remains extremely challenging amid the ongoing Zionist aggression. During a visit, Yuka Nisu, director of the Office of Human Rights in Gaza, noted the difficult conditions faced by Palestinians and expressed sympathy for the victims of ongoing massacres. Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf emphasized that supporting the move toward establishing an independent and sovereign Palestinian state cannot afford delays or procrastination. In a speech during the general debate of the 79th session of the UN General Assembly, Ahmed Attaf reminded that the Palestinian cause is at a critical and pivotal stage in its history.
كما يجدر بالمجموعة الدولية
The international community should now act swiftly to put an end to the inferno imposed on both the Palestinian and Lebanese peoples, to curb Israel's ambitions of dragging the entire Middle East into an endless cycle of crisis, conflicts, and perpetual wars. The international community must recognize that it is facing a pivotal and decisive phase in the history of the Palestinian cause. A phase that does not allow a return to the past, a phase that does not tolerate hesitation nor reluctance in supporting the Palestinian national project, a phase that cannot afford delays or procrastination in supporting the establishment of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state as just, lasting, and final solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
And finally, Attaf also called for the expedited acceptance of Palestine's full membership in the UN, describing this action as a crucial, necessary, and urgent step for preserving the two-state solution.
من هذا المنبر
From this platform, during the previous session, President Abdelmajid Tebboune called on our United Nations organizations to expedite the full membership of the State of Palestine. This was during less turbulent, less tragic times in the occupied Palestinian territories and the wider Palestinian neighborhood. Today, as the Palestinian cause passes through its darkest historical phase ever, this demand has become all the more urgent, necessary, and inevitable. Full membership for the State of Palestine in our organization remains a crucial step toward preserving the two-state solution, countering Israeli efforts to undermine or even nullify and safeguarding the core principles of resolving the Arab-Israeli conflict and the security and stability of the region.
In other developments, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf emphasized that the security, stability, and well-being of Algeria are an integral part of the security, stability, and well-being of its neighbors and African affiliation.
أما فيما يتعلق بتطورات الأوضاع في جوارنا الإقليمي.
As for developments in the regional neighborhood, Algeria's conviction remains steadfast that addressing the multifaceted challenges faced by the countries and peoples of the region requires international support and global unity to confront the heavy burdens placed on our African sphere of belonging.
Remarks made by a representative of another country from the UN platform against Algeria, describing his words as trivial verbal outbursts and despicable. In a speech during the general debate of the 79th session of the UN General Assembly, Attaf reaffirmed Algeria's firm commitment to building a coastal edifice that enjoys security, peace and well-being, as he expressed.
A representative from one of these countries dared to make disgraceful comments about my country, remarks that are completely unworthy of the decorum of this esteemed forum and should not be met with the same kind of petty and low rhetoric. Such undignified language will be responded to by my country only with refined, polite discourse, reflecting its true loyalty and commitment to the deep-rooted ties it shares with the countries and peoples of the region. Ties that are unaffected and unshaken by transient factors, no matter how bad or poorly conceived by those who seek to inflame them. My country has a firm will and an outstretched hand and an open heart whenever circumstances require us to engage with all our brothers to build a peaceful Sahel region where security, tranquility, and prosperity reign.
Algerian Foreign Minister also emphasized the need to urgently address the issue of foreign interventions in Libya. Speaking during the general debate of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York on Monday, Attaf called for achieving consensus on a compromise framework that embodies the goals of national reconciliation and facilitates the organization of a free, fair and transparent election.
As for our neighboring country, Libya, Algeria underscores the necessity of swiftly addressing the scourge of foreign interventions that drain the resources of this brotherly nation and fuel conflicts and confrontations among its people. Only then, and only then, can Libyan brothers unite around a consensual platform to facilitate the achievement of national reconciliation and the organization of free, fair, and transparent elections. All of this serves the highest goal we hope for and sincerely wish for from the depths of our hearts: the unification of Libya, its people, its land, its government, and its institutions.
The head of Algerian diplomacy reaffirmed Algeria's support for the UN Secretary General and his personal envoy's efforts to achieve a political solution that allows the Sahrawi people to exercise their inalienable right to self-determination. Mr. Attaf emphasized that the legitimate demands of the Sahrawi people will ultimately prevail despite attempts to maintain the colonial status quo and the occupied Sahrawi territories. And finally, in our news, the Sahrawi cause received strong support at the 79th UN General Assembly, with leaders affirming backing for the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination, calling for an end to colonialism in Western Sahara. Hosam Barkan has more.
Thanks to the legitimacy of their cause and the strength of their defenders' arguments, the issue of Western Sahara has once again made its presence felt in the halls of international organizations, gaining unprecedented support from various nations. During the general debate of the 79th Ordinary Session of the United Nations General Assembly, numerous heads of states and delegations from Asia, Latin America, and Africa reaffirmed their country's firm stance on the unalienable right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination. Grounded in historical and legal arguments, this represents a significant blow to Morocco and its backers, who seek to distort clear facts to support their position.
Western Sahara is a country that has faced political uncertainty for almost 5 decades. In October 1975, the International Court of Justice held that Western Sahara was a non-self-governing territory and that it should follow the parameters and principles stated in the UN General Assembly resolution for self-determination through the free and genuine expression of the will of the peoples of the territory.
The Moroccan occupation, on the other hand, continues to perpetuate lies and invent new falsehoods aiming to erase the Sahrawi issue from the list of decolonization cases and consign it to the archives.
We urge the full implementation of United Nations resolutions aimed at ending all forms of colonialism and occupation, particularly emphasizing the need for the self-determination of the people of the Western Sahara.
Others rejected Morocco's falsehoods and called for the urgent empowerment of the Sahara people to organize the long-awaited self-determination referendum, which is essential to ending the suffering of this resilient people.
The people of Western Sahara should be granted their long overdue referendum to decide their own future. Belize continues its repeated call for the United Nations and the international community to take the necessary steps to allow the Sahrawi people to finally exercise their right to self-determination.
From New York, international argument based on history and legal jurisdiction have legitimized the Sahrawi cause, undermining the Makhzen regime claims and its fictitious plan of so-called autonomy, which is based on false myths and expansionist ambitions.
Ladies and gentlemen, our program has come to an end. Thanks for watching and bye-bye.